Hello, welcome to Ruminations, the new podcast from the Savory Institute. I am your host. My name is Bobby Gill. I am the Director of Development and Communications here on the Savory team. I've been with the team for about 8 years, and this podcast is something that I actually was initially planning to launch about 3 years ago, but other stuff got in the way. So here we are. So, what is Ruminations? What is this podcast? Um, well, for one, it's an opportunity to tell the stories of the people involved in our ecosystem. The work we do at the Savory Institute, regenerating global grasslands, um, is done through a very rich and diverse network, the Savory Global Network. We have regional learning hubs all around the world. There's about 50 of them. We've got a little over 200 holistic management educators. We've got our ecological outcome verification. That's our land monitoring protocol that's now being done on over 3 million hectares. That feeds into the land to market program, which is, how consumers can buy verified products that come from verified regenerating land bases. And that's, across food, fashion, and footwear. Um, we have the Savory Foundation in Denmark, which funds the implementation of large scale grassland regeneration projects. And that will soon be getting into ecosystem service markets. So that's all to say there's a lot going on. And as a small team at Savory and, kind of a one-man communications department over here, it's impossible to tell all the stories of everyone involved in this work. I can't just easily get up and go fly with a film crew to tell the stories and get case studies of the people that are doing this work in all corners of the globe. But a podcast instantly opens that door so that I can jump on a call with someone, record it, and then bring it to you, the listener, and invite you into their world so that you can understand the work that they do, and not just what they do, but how they think about it and what lessons they've learned along the way and what struggles they've had and the challenges and the insights. So that's what I'm trying to get at in this podcast. I want to tell the stories of people that are making real change. This will often be through the lens of holistic management and the greater regenerative agriculture space, but it'll be beyond that as well. We're going to interview farmers and ranchers and pastoralists and brands and supply chain partners and economists and artists and advocates and policy experts and authors, and the list goes on. The people that manage our working lands, our global grasslands, are as diverse as the species that are growing and living in their pastures. And so I want to uncover those, and I want to shine a light on them and tell their stories. Most importantly, this podcast is for you, the listener. I want you, no matter your background or your level of experience, to feel comfortable in these conversations and to come away from each episode educated and inspired and intrigued and, maybe even entertained. So who am I? You may be wondering. Well, I said my name is Bobby. I'm the Director of Development and Communications. Been on the Savory team for about 8 years. In my role, I handle marketing and communications, so I built the website, I run the social media accounts, all that sort of stuff. But I also handle our fundraising programs and, being a small team at Savory, we often wear many hats. I get into the research a lot, and that's because I went to school for biomedical engineering. That's, what I was trained in. The first chapter of my career, I actually worked as a biomedical engineer for the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And I used to review clinical trials and testing data for medical devices, specifically cardiovascular devices, if you're curious. And so, in that role, an important part was being critical about what people present to you and trying to find the truth of the matter and not just accepting things at face value, but peeling away the layers of the onion to learn more about really what's going on. And I hope the conversations that we have in this podcast do that as well. Um, Aside from my engineering background, I used to be an elite level ultramarathon runner, used to have podium finishes on 100-mile races. I used to be a skydiving instructor. I've got around 800 jumps. My most important jobs, I'm a father and a husband. I live in Colorado. Um, I'd say I'm a fairly curious person about a range of topics. And, I hope to bring that out in this podcast. I have coming from my athletic background, that's what got me into regenerative ag and ultimately landed me here at Savory. I'm really curious about the intersection of personal and planetary health. I find that in this field, that's often an entry point for a lot of people. Someone who is curious about their personal health will often get to the question, where does my food come from? And when they ask that question, it opens up a whole new world where someone comes to understand that what's good for me is also good for the planet. Um, I know that was my personal journey. That was my aha moment when the light bulb went off and I realized, what am I doing with my life? I need to dedicate everything I have to this because this is the most important thing that anyone could be doing in the world. No matter where you are, we all eat food. We all need clean air to breathe, clean water to drink. We need fertile soils to continue growing our foods. We need a livable planet, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. And regenerative agriculture and holistic management provide an opportunity for that. So, that I think also is a good opportunity to explore things through the lens of evolutionary biology, looking at not just the practices that someone is implementing on their land base, but looking at the patterns of the interaction between land and animal and people. Um, those interactions, when you look at not just practices, but the the patterns and the principles behind complex adaptive living systems, looking at it from, hey, how did this landscape used to look 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, et cetera, and then finding those patterns of health and then saying, how can we replicate that in this modern context? That angle of thinking is something that really intrigues me. So I hope to bring on some guests where we can dive deep into some of that. Um, Systems thinking, I think, falls in line with that as well, looking at complex systems in comparison to complicated systems. How do we take a holistic perspective and approach to how we manage complex systems because we don't have ultimate control over them. We can only influence them. I'm going to stop there. That's a whole episode unto itself. Um, I'm someone that likes social issues, but in this podcast, we're not going to get into politics. Um, I really believe that regenerative agriculture is a nonpartisan or bipartisan issue. It is something that people from all walks of life can get behind, no matter what your political affiliations might be. So we're going to avoid those political conversations because we don't want to turn anyone off. And there's plenty of places you can go to have those conversations. Um, we're going to talk about our shared common ground here, and what can be done to continue moving the ball forward. Um, Ultimately, I want to explore, like what makes people tick. Um, you know, I think already mentioned moving beyond practices to look at, patterns, um, because that's where I think the truth lies. Um, Nature doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And if we can learn those rhythms, I think there's a lot of insight to be had there. A real important piece, I think, about who I am as the host of this podcast, at least it's important to me, is I'm not a farmer or a rancher. I don't come from an ag background. I didn't grow up, you know, doing 4-H or anything like that. I came to this work later in life, out of curiosity and a lot of research, and asking the question where my food comes from, and going to visit farms and ranches and immersing myself in this whole new world that, someone who grew up in the suburbs outside of Washington, D.C., shout out PG County. Um, and in doing so, it's expanded my worldview and allowed me to appreciate different perspectives and to see things from new angles and to bring new angles to conversations that perhaps otherwise, wouldn't be part of the conversation. So, I changed careers in my 30s because, this is something that I came to understand. It was really Alan Savory's TED Talk that was that aha moment for me, understanding that my personal health is intrinsically intertwined with planetary health. And that's what changed it all for me. So, ultimately here in this show, I'm hoping to be a stand in for you, the listener. Whether you're a multi generational farmer or rancher with, a ton of experience, or if you're just an everyday concerned citizen that is wanting to understand a bit more about the agricultural landscape and all of the adjacent fields that it touches. Um, you know, since I don't come from an ag background, I know that it can be intimidating if you're new to be in some of these conversations. And so, as a stand-in for the listener, my hope is that I can ask the questions that you're thinking, that you might not be able to. Um, but also, having now been with the Savory team for, almost a decade now, hopefully be able to translate some of these more complex, nuanced topics, um, to translate things into relatable layman terms. Um, because it's really easy to take some of these conversations, say for example, soil science, and get really deep in the weeds about carbon sequestration and all sorts of stuff. But I think what really matters is, how does this affect me? How does this affect my community? How does this affect the environment that supports all of us? And, what can I do about it? What can any of us do about it? Um, so yeah, that's what I'm hoping to get out of this new show that we're calling Ruminations. Um, all right, what can we expect from it? Let's say probably drop a new episode every week. That might be every other week, so don't hold me to any particular schedule. It'll depend on how often I can record and get things edited. I'm kind of doing this all myself. Might periodically bring in a guest host, just to mix things up a little bit. Maybe we'll change the format around every once in a while. It'll largely be an interview-based podcast where I'm here interviewing guests. Conversations could be 30 minutes. They could be 3 hours. I don't know. We'll see where the conversation takes us and go from there. Ultimately, just looking to have wide-ranging, complex, thought-provoking conversations. Um, It'll be an audio and video podcast, so you can find us wherever you download your podcasts, whether that be Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And we're also going to put videos of our interviews up on YouTube, so you can find every episode there, or at least that's the goal. Um, and, this is just the beginning. So I hope that it is a long and winding adventure that we can take together, finding inspiration and insights along the way. And ultimately, I hope you enjoy it. So let's dig in. This episode was edited by Claire Everson, and her theme music was composed and performed by Travis McNamara. Ruminations is a production of the Savory Institute, the Savory Foundation, and Land to Market. If you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and subscribing to our YouTube channel, where you can find video versions of all episodes, plus other content. If you're looking for show notes, links to things mentioned in the episode, transcripts, sponsorship info, or if you'd like to even suggest a guest to come on the show, all of that can be found on our website at savory.global/podcast. And last but certainly not least, thank you to our committed and growing community of regenerating members whose monthly support allows Savory to produce this podcast and continue advancing holistic management all across the globe. If you're not yet a member, we welcome you to join us with open arms, and we would love to have you as part of our community. Just sign up at savory.global/member. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.